Tonight, we're looking at something the Kremlin never wanted to admit was possible: a Ukrainian deep strike that wiped out a major Russian hub, followed by Moscow threatening the United States directly, and the White House firing back. Ukrainian forces reportedly used U.S.-supplied long-range missiles, guided by Western intelligence, to hit a sprawling Russian command and control and logistics complex in occupied Luhansk. The strike shattered key infrastructure, ignited massive secondary explosions, and, according to multiple reports, killed or wounded senior officers responsible for directing operations along this part of the front. Within hours, Moscow went public, blaming not just Kiev but Washington, branding the attack an American operation and hostile act, and warning there would be consequences for the United States. The White House answered with a terse but unusually sharp National Security Council statement: any move against U.S. personnel, assets, or interests would trigger a decisive and overwhelming response, backed by visible shifts in U.S. military posture. Tonight, analysts are asking whether this is the closest we've come to a direct U.S.-Russia clash. In this video, we're going to break down exactly what Ukraine hit, what Russia threatened, and why Washington chose such blunt language now. Ukraine has been hitting Russian targets for months, and the Kremlin has been blaming the collective West almost by reflex. But what happened after Luhansk is different. This time, Moscow isn't just hinting at Western involvement, it is branding the operation as American, insisting that U.S. missiles and U.S. intelligence make Washington a direct participant, not just a supplier. In public, the line is simple: why are fighting NATO? Russia inflates its opponent to excuse why its army keeps failing. The reality is different. Ukrainian soldiers are the ones doing the fighting, planning missions, and taking casualties. The West is providing tools and information to help a democracy survive an invasion. By threatening the United States directly, the Kremlin is trying to shift blame for its failures, scare Western capitals away from enabling more deep strikes, and rally Russians around the fantasy of a great power showdown. Understanding that move is crucial to reading Moscow's next step closely. To understand why this strike shook Moscow, you have to start with where it landed. Luhansk has been under Russian control since 2014, folded into Putin's so-called new territories, and used as a deep staging ground, logistics hub, and command center for operations across eastern Ukraine. The target Ukraine hit was reportedly a sprawling complex that combined headquarters functions, communications nodes, ammunition storage, and coordination for forces along a key stretch of the front. With a TACMS-type long-range missiles and advanced drones, Ukraine can now hit from far away with precision at depths Russia once assumed were safe. This is part of a pattern in recent months. Air bases, depots, and command posts in occupied regions have all come under Ukrainian fire, often using Western-supplied systems and intelligence support. Western officials insist Ukraine chooses the targets. Russia seizes on any U.S. role in preparation or weapons to claim America is in the fight. The line between support and direct involvement feels blurrier by design from the Kremlin. First, the missiles hit. In the middle of the night, Ukrainian long-range strikes slammed into the Luhansk hub. Secondary explosions rippled through ammunition stores, fuel tanks burned for hours, communications towers collapsed. By morning, satellite imagery and local footage left no doubt this was a major blow. Second, Russian officials and state TV rushed from downplaying the damage to reframing it as an American-planned strike, insisting that U.S. intelligence and ATSEMs meant this was a hostile act by Washington itself. Third, Moscow began sending visible signals. Long-range bombers were put on combat alert. MiG-31s armed with Kinzhal hypersonic missiles scrambled. Strategic submarines slipped out of port with their transponders off. Naval assets quietly redeployed. The message: we can hit back even beyond Ukraine. Fourth, the White House answered. A National Security Council statement warned that any action against U.S. forces, embassies, satellites, or infrastructure will be met with a decisive and overwhelming response. Within days, an Aegis-equipped destroyer sailed into a sensitive region. B-52s flew patrols over Eastern Europe. Reconnaissance flights increased. Fifth, behind the cameras, crisis phones lit up NATO briefings, urgent calls with allies, and a back-channel message to Moscow stressing that Washington will not be intimidated, but is not seeking direct war. This was a fast, tense sequence watched by markets, militaries, and millions asking how close we are to the edge. Every move raised the stakes one side, striking the infrastructure of an illegal occupation, the other waving nuclear shadows, and the United States trying to show enough strength to deter disaster without giving Putin the excuse he craves. That balance has never felt frailer. For Vladimir Putin, moments like this cut into the story he sold Russians for years that he brought safety. Instead, he faces setbacks, casualties, sanctions, and dissent he can't fully hide. When strikes smash Russian-held hubs and the world openly credits Western systems, they threaten that image directly. Threatening the United States lets him project defiance outward rather than admit vulnerability at home. Kyiv's logic is the opposite. Ukraine has learned that the Kremlin respects only pressure. By hitting high-value war infrastructure in Luhansk and beyond, it is saying, your rear is not safe while you bomb our cities and occupy our land. And every effective use of weapons and intelligence is also a message to allies. Your support is not symbolic, it is changing the battlefield. Washington is trapped in a corridor. If U.S. backing looks too cautious, it invites more Russian escalation and doubt about American resolve. If it looks too overt, it risks giving Moscow a pretext to strike U.S. assets or allies. Western analysts see this as the new face of 21st century proxy conflict, nuclear powers pushing each other to the edge of direct war without slipping. This is a clash between a brittle authoritarian regime clinging to fear and a democracy trying to stop aggression without starting something worse. In NATO headquarters and European capitals, this episode lands with mixed emotions. There is real relief that the United States answered Russia's threats clearly and firmly, reinforcing the idea that any move against Western assets will be met, not ignored. At the same time, there is quiet anxiety about being caught between an enraged Moscow and a defiant Washington if things spin out of control. This moment will echo in debates from Berlin to Paris to Warsaw over whether to send more long-range systems to Ukraine and how urgently to harden power grids, ports, and cyber networks against possible Russian retaliation. Far beyond Europe, adversaries in Beijing and Tehran are watching closely. If Washington blinks, Western credibility is weakened everywhere. If it stands firm and Russia ultimately backs down, the message is different democracies can resist nuclear-flavored blackmail. The choices made now on weapons, sanctions, and red lines will shape not just Ukraine's fate, but the rules every would-be aggressor sees. This moment is a snapshot of the long war's most dangerous dynamic, Ukraine growing stronger at striking what sustains Russia's invasion, and Russia trying to drag the United States into a permanent, fear-based standoff. On one side, the Kremlin leans on terror threats and nuclear hints as tools of policy. On the other, Ukraine uses targeted force to hit military infrastructure and reclaim its own land. Caught between them, Washington is trying to walk a narrow line between support and direct war, signaling resolve without losing control. In the end, wars are decided by reality, not propaganda, by who can sustain operations, keep alliances together, and adapt under pressure. Ukraine is not asking for new territory, only the end of occupation and the right to live without bombardment and threats. The question now is whether the world lets nuclear-armed bullies define the rules, or whether Ukraine and its allies show that even in a moment this dangerous, aggression still carries a cost the aggressor cannot bear for long.